Thank you for joining us for this short tutorial around completing a costed provision map. The SEND Code of Practice 2015 shares with us that provision maps are an efficient way of showing all the provision that the school makes which is additional to and different from that which is offered through the school's curriculum. An individual costed provision map supports a graduated approach by recording the special education provision in place to support a child or young person's SEND which exceeds the school's notional budget of £6,000. Wolverhampton Local Authority requires a costed provision map to be submitted to support an ECNA request, annual reviews of an EHCP. A costed provision map is also useful when making a referral to the ISAP panel to demonstrate the extent of provision the school have already implemented. They should be a working document that is added to throughout the year as provision is implemented. As you can see, I've navigated to the Wolverhampton Inclusive Schools for Everyone webpage. Once you've found your way here, scroll down to Step 3, View SEND Pathway Targeted Stage. Underneath the Download section, click on the tab to open up the costed provision map. Once you've downloaded the document, we recommend that you save it in your own local drive. Before we move on to the expectations from the local authority around completing a costed provision map, I'd like to highlight the tabs that we've produced to support when completing the document. Starting from the left, we have agreed costings for staffing, which has been pre-populated by the LA. 2 tabs to populate the provision that a child or young person is accessing to enable you to show the costings for separate year groups, for example, summer in year 8 and autumn and spring in year 9. The time conversion table tab shares the conversions for minutes to decimals. A very handy do's and don'ts list with lots of information to support you when completing the document, alongside a waggle for primary and for secondary. So now let's look in more detail around how to populate the costed provision map. We suggest to start at the very beginning of the day. Consider any personalised provision in place for the child or young person as soon as they come to site. For example, in the spring term, for Joe, he is met by a trusted adult on a one-to-one basis. In this instance, that is with a trusted teaching assistant. Therefore, we will choose Teaching Assistant from the drop-down box. You can see that the cost per hour is then automatically populated. This takes place for 10 minutes. Using the Time Conversion tab, I will populate with 0.17. The meet and greet takes place every morning, therefore we can input 5 sessions per week, and this has been taking place every week for the last term, which was 10 weeks long. You can see that once all this information has been added, the overall cost auto-populates here. It is important to note that because the meet and greet is delivered by a TA as a targeted provision to support Joe's social, emotional and mental health needs, this can be included on the costed provision map. If, however, this was carried out by the form tutor, it could not be included in the costings because the form tutor would be in class anyway and a brief personalised meet and greet could be expected as part of adaptive teaching. Before we move on to the next provision, ensure you've included details about the impact the provision has had for Joe in the comments section. You can also use this box to highlight when a specialist has recommended this particular provision. For example, EP recommendation to support with regulation and a smooth transition from home to school. You can see now we have populated the costed provision map for the spring term. It is likely that following the cycle of Assess Plan Do review that some of the provision will need to be amended in order to ensure Joe's needs are continuing to be met. Therefore, we can now populate the provision for the summer term, taking into account any changes following the review meeting with parents, Joe and specialists. For example, Joe may attend an alternative provision for 2 afternoons a week in the summer term. This can be included on your provision map if it is a school commissioned placement. Once the summer term is complete, you will need to populate the autumn term on the new tab as Joe will have moved up a year. This allows for the provision for Joe to be recorded over the years on the same document. Feedback from SENDStart highlight these common errors. The total number of hours exceed the number of hours in the school day. It is important to note that the costed provision would only be for the time within the school day, approximately 6.5 hours, before and after school cannot be included. Be mindful of duplication. For example, when Joe is accessing the AP, he will not be accessing the provision normally available to him in school, so the number of sessions per week will need amending. So for the summer term, when Jo is accessing AP for 2 afternoons a week, I would reduce the sensory circuit sessions from 10 per week to 8. In some circumstances, a provision or intervention may be delivered by a teacher or a member of the senior leadership team. However, when recording this on your costed provision map, it needs to be considered what level of qualifications and expertise is required to deliver that provision. If it can be delivered by a teaching assistant, then you should record it as a teaching assistant on the costed provision map, regardless of who delivers it within your setting. For example, on this costed provision map, Jo accesses Lunch Club in the Hub, which in this setting is delivered by a teacher. However, a skilled teaching assistant could deliver the provision. It does not require a qualified teacher. It is worth mentioning here that if the Lunch Club is part of your school's universal offer for children with or without SEND, you would not be able to include it in the provision on your individual costed provision map. However, in this case, as the Lunch Club is a targeted provision which has been set up specifically to meet the needs of children with SEND, it would be appropriate for it to be included. You can see that although Jo accesses support on a one-to-one level at all times throughout the day, I've estimated the average time in each lesson that he would be in receipt of one-to-one support, to acknowledge that there are times in all lessons where Jo works independently. In the comments section, I have identified the targeted or personalised support that is being implemented by the adult to ensure the type of provision he is in receipt of is explicit. Beneath the main table, if you scroll down, you will see other support staff and costs. As mentioned earlier, this is where you can input costings for alternative provision or external forest school staff. It is worth pointing out that attendance at meetings and completion of ECNA and annual review paperwork is part of your statutory duties and cannot be included. EP assessments are also a statutory duty, so they cannot be included. However, direct work with an EP, such as GRASS social skills programme, or interventions to target emotionally based school non-attendance may be included. Training can only be included if it is specifically to support the individual's needs. Bear in mind, if the skills delivered in the training can be applied to benefit and support other children and young people, these training costs cannot be included on the individual costed provision map. Now, to the final section of the costed provision map, the equipment and other related costs. Only resources that are specifically purchased for the individual child or young person can be included here, as they are purchased using top-up funding and will move with them to any other settings should they move in the future. Once all of the costed provision map has been populated, if the child or young person is accessing SEND support and the total SEND spend exceeds the notional budget of £6,000, consider holding a multi-agency meeting to discuss if an ECNA request would be appropriate. We hope you have found this tutorial useful. As mentioned, please refer to the Handy Do's and Don'ts tab on the spreadsheet, and if you require any further support, contact the SEND and Inclusion officers on the email that can be found here. Thank you.